Welcome again to the weekly wellness check-in. This is now week 7, right, Cara?
Yes, week 7.
Okay, week 7. And my name is Saki Litov. I'm a patient advocate and a health navigator in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. And my partner, Cara, is.
So a case manager in community services with a focus on self-care. And today we have uh, a quick survey. That's right, before we get started. So I'll let you do this one, Saki,
Okay.
because I did the other one
So
last week.
the survey is really just kind of a personal check-in for everybody of these are the challenges of healthy habits that we've put out for each morning. And so our first week we talked a lot about mindset, but we really put it out to have people hydrate every day. We talked a lot about journaling and walking, just getting up and moving daily. We had a great conversation with a nutritionist about breaking the fast and adding that as an important part of your day. The week after that, we had somebody talking about sleep and gave some options how to improve your sleep. And then this past week, we actually talked about creating a new morning ritual, which is a great segue into this week. Cara, do you want
Yeah,
to introduce the topic? And
I will. So
here's the
just
recap.
following on. Yep. So following on from what you were saying, Saki, the recap of weeks 1 to 6 was the mindset foundations, which were sleep, diet, exercise, prayer, and meditation. Exercise and movement, food for thought, sleep, and just this last week was our morning ritual. And this week, our
That's right.
topic, yeah, that's right. No, I had it the other way around this week, didn't I? Getting myself confused. But today's topic is grow in the face of adversity. And to introduce this topic to you, we have guest speaker, Davida Ginter. Davida, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, pleasure. Hi, happy to be here today. Um, I'm working in the field actually of burnout prevention, where I got to, after writing a book about burnout, specifically amongst leaders and change makers. And then it grew from there to work about and with burnout prevention in a wider context. So with leaders still, but also with people from all walks of life and organizations and in the um, work setting. And this is where we started our organization, Enkindle Global, where we support people in cultivating well-being, emotional resilience, and different practices to prevent burnout on time. And I'm happy to be here today and talk about adversity and fear, but also growth and how to make it into an opportunity to learn something about ourselves.
So before we dive in, could you actually talk a little bit more about the work you're doing within Kindle and leadership? Do you work with individuals or do you work with teams? How does that work?
Yeah, so we actually do both. We have started by working with individuals. We do something we call capacity circles, where we gather people into with different methodologies, but the main is just to open up the space for people to connect around their struggles, their stressors, their challenges in an open way, in a safe environment. And then they are supported through the circle, through the group. We give support with our team. Then people have started to come to us afterwards and say, well, this is all great, and we can take the practices and start implement them in our routines. But then we go back to work. So tomorrow morning, even if I'm doing something different in my personal life, I'm going to the very same system that has contributed to my stress and maybe anxiety and then burnout. And say, well, that's a very good point. And we have started also to see how can we tap into those systems. So how can we support also working teams, maybe even entire organizations, by helping them to embed well-being into their organizational culture. So what could be done differently in every organizational setting to support employees' well-being? And we are doing that by facilitating strategic processes, because we say that organizations and specifically businesses are going strategically about pretty much everything. Then why not well-being? Why not come and do it in a structured, organized way that will actually support employees, managers, leaders, the entire organization in that field of well-being? So this is the work that we do.
So are you familiar with Simon Sinek?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I figured, and because that's very much along the lines of the things he talks about. And I know Cara and I have talked about this, but I personally have worked for many unhealthy organizations where, even the concept and idea of doing something like this was outside the realm of understanding. And so I have great appreciation for the work that you're doing. And it's also, it'll be interesting as over time we'll become more familiar with it, to see how that's really implemented in companies, because it's so desperately needed, anywhere. I don't know what it's like. I mean, in the U.S. it's pretty unhealthy. What is it like in Australia, Cara?
I can actually say that I have experienced burnout. So this particular topic, Davida, is very, very close to my heart. I have experienced trauma and PTSD in the workplace, which, left unsupported, led to burnout. And I've also seen it occur for colleagues as well. And that's where I guess, advocating for better support systems within the workplace and, employee wellbeing programs, that's where all that came from. Because I was tired of seeing that burnout, that lack of support, that lack of understanding. So I do feel that larger organizations are trying to take a step in the right direction now, bigger businesses and companies, but still it's quite a slow process.
Hi, Isabella.
Hello.
So, Davida, can we just jump right in? Do you want me to bring your slides up?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, so we have your screen up.
Okay. So, grow in the face of adversity. And I'm happy that you talked me into put it as a verb, as an action, grow. We had this discussion about the title, and I believe in action. I love inspiring words, but I'm also a very practical person. And we're going to do a lot of it today, actually, is also talk about actions and the practical stuff. But we first start with perspective and mindset. And I typed in the word tunnel when I was looking for an image. And then this one came up. And I thought, why am I seeing a flower? And then I thought, okay, no, it is a tunnel. I'm not sure if it's the entrance or the exit of the tunnel, but it's also shaped like a flower. So it's a question of how do I see it? From which lens am I looking through? Everything, pretty much. And this is our approach for today. How do we face adversity in a way that will actually contribute to our growth? And this is pretty much what we're going to cover today. First, why now? Just to give some context, why we're bringing this today, May 2020, what's the relevancy? Then we're going to talk a bit about practice versus planning, and why, in that case, practice actually, when it kicks in, help us to face adversity way better than planning. And then we're going to dive into fear without frightening anyone. But we're going to break down some cliches and what we think we know about fear and how to treat it maybe differently and how to face fear. That's the very practical stage of our presentation today. And then some exercise that, if you want, you can take away with you and actually start to test and try it for yourself.
And just as a side comment, this is an interesting topic for us today because Cara and I have spoken about this. A lot of the things that we've focused on are very much practical, healthy, body-focused things, even if it's meditation or mindset. But even just putting the word fear in, and knowing that we're talking to somebody who deals with people with burnout really gives it a depth that I'm excited to share.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk about it in a few minutes, but this is also about expressing fear in a more open and safe way. But we're going to touch upon it soon. So firstly, why now? And let me tell you that as a person who works with not only burnout prevention, but everything that goes behind the scenes, stress and sometimes anxiety, the feeling of being overwhelmed, and then all the way to burnout, it has been there before. It has been there before, but what's happening now in the world during the COVID time, the pandemic, the stress is even higher, which is naturally, and we can understand, because people are now facing uncertainty. They sometimes have no idea. It's been very strong. It felt strongly in the last few weeks. People have no idea when this situation will end. When are we out again, out of sheltering, out of the lockdown? And then when we are out, how do we go back to the routine? There are actually some stress cases now from people who are struggling to go back to their routines. People are naturally afraid to lose their loved ones, are concerned about their or their loved ones' health. So many reasons for increased stress now, but it's nothing new. The numbers are higher now. But stress, and if we mentioned burnout, and I'll say it again, it's pretty much an epidemic now that we do want to manage in a better, in a healthier way. So just to show you a few quick numbers, and I promise that's the last slide with numbers for the first and last slide with numbers for today. But if you see, for example, the number of calls and texts received for help during these days, you can see 7,000 phone calls and almost 20,000 text messages during March 2020 to the hotline to receive help from people who felt stress and anxiety and fear and all those very heavy emotions, while it has been there before the stress. So you can see from the top right that 60% of workers, now it's in the workplace, we can refer to that, 60% have not only felt stress, it actually brought them into tears in the workplace. And down there you can see the more new data about stress, which has measured during COVID times. It brought up, it is increased to 88%. So this is to show that stress is high even before, was high even before the current time, but now it's even higher, and this is something we want to treat better.
So 60% is normal.
Exactly, yeah. It has been measured during the last few years. It's increasing every year in 1 or 2 percentages since 2017. Wow. And that's a number that we should refer to. But then we go, to the people behind the numbers, because this is what we're about, stories and people and relationships. And then we ask, so what do we do with this? This is just data, right? What do we do with this situation of people feeling stressed out, and obviously more stressed out because uncertainty, adversity, challenges, struggles, etc. And the reply that we see is way more efficient, is actually go into the word that you two are familiar with, which is practice. And that is to say that we might be all good planners. We have a plan for everything, right? We have a structure, we have guidelines, we have instructions. We know what to do. until we don't know what to do, until we meet life, until we meet reality.
There's a quote that I
Right?
love to share that says,
Yeah,
"We make plans and God laughs."
exactly. So in that case, sometimes we laugh. Usually we laugh in hindsight, right? Because when we face this specific challenge, most of the times we don't laugh, we are struggling. Uh, but then it's a question, do we have a good practice that kicks in and help us face the unknown situation? And practice should start way earlier than the stage that we actually face the challenge. For example, when you run a marathon, you don't start practicing when you're already up the hill. You're coming prepared. So when you are running there up the hill, when your breath is shortening, you already know what to do. Your body knows what to do because you have been prepared before, even if you're not familiar with this hill at all. So this is what we say, that practice beats planning when it comes to facing adversity. And there are different practices that people can take. And this is, by the way, this is your series of wellness. So everything that you are teaching during this series is part of this practice. But this is to say, practice, make the practice part of you to handle the situation better. But now when it comes to fear, it's again a question, can we use practice to manage fear? And even before that, we need to understand, what is this fear all about? And this is a topic I love dealing with. I know it sounds strange, who love dealing with fear? But the reason I like it is because fear is, on one hand, so common to basically all people, all humans. But there are so many different ways to handle it, to manage it, but for maybe even to react to fear. And I'll start actually with something which is a bit on the kind of negative side of handling fear, and that is the judgmental reactions that we might receive or accidentally give to others. So I'm quite sure you are familiar with this one, when someone is afraid and people are telling them, oh, there's nothing to be afraid of. Maybe we have heard this as children, maybe we are unintentionally telling it to our children, and with all the best intentions, right? We want to relieve the fear and the pain for the other person. But this is not a relief, this is not helpful. Why? Because we invalidate the fear. We are invalidating someone's subjective emotion. What do you mean there's nothing to be afraid of? I'm afraid of something now, and this is the reality. So with all the best intentions, there are a better way to help someone overcome fear than telling them that there's nothing to be afraid of. Or maybe this one, your fear is irrational. So within science, there is something called irrational fear. This is phobia. But even if it's true, it doesn't mean that this person is now open to listen to a piece of rational information, to something logical, right? Because if you are trapped in this emotion now, you need an emotional hook to help you out of this situation. Maybe the logical reasoning is not helpful here. So to tell someone that the fear, or to yourself that the fear is irrational, might not help you. And this is my favorite one. Probably you've seen it in social media, in articles, right? Become fearless. Maybe there's a motivational speaker standing there on stage. You can be fearless. No, you can't. No one can be fearless. Fear is part of life. And the best way to handle it is to first acknowledge that is part of life, and fear exists. Yes, we can reduce it, we can face it, we can handle it, absolutely. And we're gonna talk about it in a couple of minutes. But first to acknowledge it, because when we say become fearless, we are trying to convince someone not to feel something so natural and so human. And this is again to invalidate someone's emotions.
And it's interesting to me that I've not thought of it this way, but this idea that fearless is a term that is used a lot today for empowerment.
Yeah,
And it's an interesting concept. I hadn't really thought about it that way, in that it really can be incredibly invalidating. And so, on the one hand, somebody is trying to build somebody up, and by doing so, could potentially be causing more harm than good.
exactly, exactly. So you walk out from this talk, or maybe you've read this article and you feel so prompt, yeah, I can become fearless. And then the next day, you're facing fear and you're thinking, what's wrong with me? I'm supposed to be fearless now, right? No, you're not. You are human. And now it's a question of how do you handle that? So this is a circle that I want to show that doesn't have to go in that way, or maybe it's the other way around. And you can choose where you're starting from. But when you are facing fear, there are different approaches, even before the practicality. There are different approaches that you can take to facing this fear. But I still wanted to show it as a circle to represent that it's an iterative process. So you can start here and go from there, maybe go back, and maybe then you go down the circle or up the circle. It doesn't matter, as long as you are aware and intentionally choosing your approach to facing fear. So let's go. I'll walk you through this circle and the different approaches. Maybe we'll start with acknowledging fear, just like we did a minute ago. To the left, acknowledging fear is about openly stating, it could be to yourself, it could be to others, it doesn't matter. Openly state that you have this fear now, right? Even before you analyze, what is this fear, where does it come from? I'm afraid, and that's okay. I'm expressing my emotion, I acknowledge that I am afraid of something, and if this fear is there. And let's talk about befriending fear, which is pretty much like we mentioned the tunnel and the flower at the beginning, which is to look at fear not so much as our enemy, but as something else. Maybe it's a teacher meant to teach us something. Maybe we can learn something about ourselves from this fear. So befriending our fear is not because we want to be afraid all the time. Friends is something that we run alongside, but it's because we don't want to treat this fear as the enemy that we are constantly hiding from. Look at it from a more positive perspective, if it's possible. From there, maybe something more practical, which is handling fear, a set of methodologies, practices, frameworks, and we, again, going to talk about a few of them in a minute, but it's about becoming prepared, like we said before, with your practice. How do you handle this fear? How do you maybe even pause now when you are afraid and choose what do you want to do? How does this practice comes into place? And how do you handle this specific fear? So you are very consciously choosing your reactions and then actions, and structure your entire behavior. Growing out of fear is basically this empowerment that Yuzaki mentioned just a minute ago, but in different ways. So instead of being empowered by thinking I am fearless, you are being empowered by understanding that you can actually grow from this experience. And this is about leaning into the fear, which I'm going to explain in more depth in the next slide. And questioning fear down this circle is about observing this fear with an open mind, trying to understand where is it coming from. There are different types of fear. Where is this fear driven from? What can understand? How can I understand better what's happening for me now? And of course, it's related to all the mindfulness practices that you are sharing in your series, because this is part of it, being mindful of what's going on inside you. But the one thing I want to say before we move on to the practical stuff is this one. So you have the choice. And what's working for me doesn't necessarily work for you. Why? Because we're different people. Because I have a different maybe life experience or circumstances and characteristic, and you are a different person. So you might want to choose something else, and not only it's fine, this is perfect. This is being very conscious about how do you choose to face fear or adversity or basically any situation of stress, something unpleasant. it might be even more harmful to blindly follow others' advice. So if someone comes in and tell you, oh, you should face this fear this way and that way, this is the best advice for them, not necessarily for you. So choose your own practice. I can't say this enough. We also talk a lot about it with burnout prevention. Is highly subjective and personal. So everything I'm going to say from now on are suggestions that you can try and test for yourself and then choose what works for you, what serves you the best. So how do you face fear? As we said, it's a practice, but we can start with something, or not start, we can choose actually something that is taken from a different field. It's called appreciative inquiry. I don't know if you are familiar with it, but it's a very, very interesting methodology of focusing on what's working, what is successful, or what was successful before. As we know from the metaphor, the empty
The glass half full. Yeah.
Exactly. What are we focusing on? So appreciative inquiry is taken from organizational learning, is that before we approach the next project, we examine the previous project and we focus on what has worked well, not where we have failed, but what has worked successfully well, and we can perpetuate for next time. And we can do the same when we face stress, challenges, and obviously fear, because we can look at past experiences and say, hey, you know what, I remember that last time, yeah, I was frightened, maybe anxious, but at some point I did very well, because then you can actually map what worked well for you and learn from that for the next experience. So this is about appreciative inquiry. And from there, you can take it very creatively and map and do and work and journal and all the other practices. But this is first to understand the idea, the mindset of appreciative inquiry. Self-observation, powerful questions, sometimes it's called the art of powerful questions, the art of self-inquiry again. And this is about asking the real, honest questions. So you should come to this practice if you are prepared and willing to be totally honest with yourself, right? Peeling off those layers, because sometimes someone is asking us, how are you doing? And say, oh, fine. We're not fine. We are everything but fine. So this is about being fully honest, first with ourselves. It's a question, do we want to share it with others or not? But first with ourselves. And those powerful questions could be anything from, what am I really afraid of? I'm telling everyone that I'm afraid that I won't have, I don't know, enough clients for my next entrepreneurial endeavor. But maybe I'm afraid of recognition, or maybe I'm afraid of something else not being valued enough. I don't know, I'm just giving examples here to say that the deeper we go with the questions and the more honest we are, the more likely we are to understand what's going on with this fear and then to face it in a more genuine and authentic way.
So I have a question. Specifically to self-observation, I know so many people who lack introspection, and frankly, the ability, it was the first thing that I thought of, is that there's so many people who just have a hard time even, understanding what to do. So how would you address this to somebody like that you're seeing is having a hard time seeing what those questions should be?
2 years ago, no, it was 3 years ago, I participated, in reply to your question, 3 years ago, I participated in one of the, I think, largest social impact experiences in the world, and that was the ULab by Professor Otto Scharmer from MIT. And I'm calling it one of the largest social impact experiences because he managed to bring up together 70,000 people from all over the world, walking through a journey of 3 months of self-observation, deep listening, crystallizing your deep core intentions. And it happens simultaneously because people went through the course, but in critical points, Otto Scharmer himself went live on screen and guided people through journaling and set of questions, and people all over the world sat simultaneously in front of the screen and were journaling. And just by knowing that I'm not the only one who is doing this deep work, and there are so many people out there sharing this deep work with me just on themselves, it felt empowering. And I know that it's not only for myself. Thousands of people shared that they had the same experience. All that to answer your question and to say, if you're struggling, to be honest with yourself and to go deep into the real questions, you need support, external support. And it doesn't have to be 70,000 people. It could be another person that you trust. It doesn't have to be a friend. It could be a mentor. It could be, I don't know, a leader, a colleague, a family member, someone you haven't met before, but you trust for a certain reason that could support you during this journey of deep self-inquiry. And for some reason, I'm thinking again of what you, Cara, shared at the beginning, when you received almost zero support in your workplace. And that's a big question there for systems, but also for leaders and for mentors and for individuals. How can we reach out for support, but also to give support when we recognize that someone needs that we can assist someone just by listening, just by being empathic. And being empathic doesn't mean to give advice. It means to listen to someone. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Leaning into fear, that's a point I love talking, because I've been struggling with that one. So one of the nights last year, I think it was like a year ago, I was outside running in the evening, and I'm not a great runner. I go out and jog because that's the easiest. I put on my running shoes, it doesn't require much, but I'm not a great runner. I go out there and it's painful, and and that night I was out again, and I don't know, like 1 kilometer in, I thought, well, it's too hard. It's too hard today. All the muscles are hurting me now. It's painful. I was not breathing well. And I was seriously considering to stop. Why not stop now? I can do it again tomorrow, right? And then suddenly, out there with the stars, it was in the evening, I remember I had the same self-conversation just the other day, like 2 days ago. I had the same self-conversation, but I managed to finish that run. So maybe I can finish it today again, knowing that it should be painful, right? Maybe it should be painful. Maybe painful means that I'm working there, that something is happening there. And when I came back, I couldn't wait to come back home and write some of my thoughts. And then I started writing about fear, not about running and pains. I started writing about fear, and the entire pages went into my book within the section about fear. And this is about sometimes when you lean into the fear, when you embrace it, almost when you kind of hug this fear, it's hard in the very same moment, but it's very rewarding afterwards, because you know you have done something meaningful. You know that this fear is here for a reason, and you come out stronger from the other side. So sometimes fear meant to teach us, run away for your life. This is all survival mechanism when we were running away from lions. But now, 2020, the lions are in our heads. So sometimes fear is there, that we need to fully feel it, lean into that, embrace it, and come out stronger, because it's there for a reason, to help us grow and to know that we have worked out better. From here, straight to the point about connecting, which we unintentionally just talked about in a minute ago when you asked your question. And this is about reaching out to other people for support and help. It is about taking initiative, actually. And, you know, sometimes when we do business, we do it so well because we take initiative and we reach out for collaborations and partnerships. But then when we struggle with our own personal challenges, we forget how to do it. But we can apply it, right, to different fields. So we can also reach out, we can take initiative and reach out and connect to people and with people about facing fear, about facing everything that we are now feeling, and get the support that we need. And of course, we can also offer support to others, and it's always feels great when it's mutual.
Before you move on, I just wanted to share.
Yeah.
Some years ago, I heard somebody present talking about fear as learning to dance with it, which I thought was really apropos, and it seems to embody a lot of the things that you're talking about. But it allowed me to very easily visualize what it was that I was worried about, and can I actually embrace this, right? And so you were just talking about hugging it, right? So just for me, the visual of dancing with your fear makes it a partner, right? Because it's there with you. It's not something to push away or dismiss. It's something to learn how to, you used the word earlier, befriend, or, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
it's exactly that. And if you now look at this list, you can see that those approaches are different by nature. Because like I said before, we are different people, but also there are different situations. So even for myself, I sometimes choose to self-observe what's going on, and by that, just a little bit to minimize the fear. Maybe it's not that bad because I'm self-observing and I understand, you know, maybe I was afraid of something that I can actually handle. But when I'm leaning into the fear, I'm not minimizing anything. I'm fully experiencing that, and I will choose differently according to the situation, right? Sometimes we want to befriend the fear, but sometimes we want to handle that differently because this is what is required now. So thank you for your comment and observation there. Lastly, and I just like finishing with that one, is empathy, and I even put here self-empathy, because we all have to talk about empathy and being empathic to other people. What about some self-empathy? What about pause the self-judgments and have some more self-acceptance? And this is part of managing fear. Like we said before, you acknowledge the fear and you accept that it's human and a very natural emotion by giving yourself some self-empathy and the space and the room, maybe for something to let go or to something new to come in. But this is part of it. To have this self-empathy and self-compassion for this situation.
I just wanted to say, Davida, that I really like that point. I think it's like what you have covered there is, you know, very much about self-awareness and allowing those experiences, you know, that to experience that emotion. And I remember a psychologist, a friend once said to me, you know, when my daughter was struggling, she's 13, she was struggling with something, you know, with emotions. When she was feeling a bit upset, I would try to cheer her up. And one thing that was pointed out to me is that rather than try to stop that emotion, allow it. And that's how we develop, you know, a healthy acceptance of the different emotions and develop that self-awareness as young people growing into adults, is to actually allow ourselves to experience the emotion rather than blocking it out or distracting ourselves, but to actually accept it.
Yes.
And I found that to be a really important point, to actually say, you know what, it's actually okay that I feel like this right now. What can I do with this? And find some, you know, a constructive way to work through it.
Absolutely. I second that. I think one of the biggest problems I see it especially amongst entrepreneurs and business owners, but not only, is this notion of bottling up fears and struggles. So it's a very, very valid point there. And on top of that, it's also an interesting conversation of when and how do we learn to express our emotions. Sometimes people get stuck even at a young age at good or bad. That's it. This is the dichotomy, good or bad. But there's a range of emotions there that we can learn to express. And these are not just words. When we learn to recognize and name this emotion, we understand better what's going on here. So we can have a better idea of what's going on, but also to reach out for specific help that we might need. So thank you for this point. It's absolutely relevant and helpful.
Thank you.
Let's take it to a practical level, and I want to offer 2 exercises for people to take away. One is from the field of appreciative inquiry. So just choose one fear, could be more. Start with one fear that you had in the past, and you actually could able to overcome it. And just ask yourself, who or what helped me to face this fear? Just sit there with yourself in a nice, calm environment. Who or what helped you to overcome this fear? Maybe it was even a specific, by the way, space, place, setting that helped you to come out stronger. And from there, you can ask yourself, what can I bring into my life more? How can I, bring into my life more of those key factors that helped me last time, and I can bring in again to help me for next time? Because like we said before, like half an hour ago, this is about practice in advance that kicks in when you need it. So if you can bring into your life more of those factors that help you before, just do it. Why not? You are coming more prepared for the next challenge, and the next challenge will come. That's natural, that's human, it will come. You can be more prepared. Second exercise is, I was thinking to myself just the other week, we learn when we teach. We learn the best when we teach others. So I was thinking, if we can teach others how to face fear, maybe it can teach us something. So how about giving someone an advice about their fears, and you can advise someone who is at the beginning of their journey, which is similar to yours, maybe. So based on your experience, what advice can you give to a person at the beginning of their journey to face fear? And make it as specific as possible. And remember that advice, they don't have to embrace it. It's very personalized, but still you are sharing advice after you have the permission. Of course, you are asking, have the permission. And sometimes by giving someone else advice, it's not just helpful for the other person, but also for ourselves. Sometimes we have this aha moment. Oh, right. I can actually implement it on myself. I've been there many times. I want to wrap up this part with a quote. I know it's a long quote, but I still want to read it. Fear keeps us focused on the past or worried about the future. But if we can acknowledge our fear, we can realize that right now we are okay. So right now, today, we're still alive, and our bodies are working marvelously, and our eyes can still see the beautiful sky, and our ears can still hear the voices of our loved ones.
That's beautiful.
Thank you for listening.
That's really lovely.
That's really great. So, Courage, I can swap back to our slides.
Yeah, thank you, Davida. That was
really wonderful.
That was really lovely, and I love that. It's almost like poetry, isn't it? That quote. It's really nice. So is that back to my share?
Yeah. So we're up on time for change.
Okay, sure. So, as we all know, each week with the webinars, we introduce, we're trying to introduce the idea that these small changes, each week, whether it's sleep, diet, exercise, journaling, meditation, facing, you know, those emotions and the, you know, that stress, fear, and worry. Um, we're trying to, you know, sort of implement a little change each week. Um, and the challenge for this week is relax, refresh, and recharge. So those questions, Davida, that you introduced, they'll be a part of the challenge this week. So just preparing ourselves, you know, mentally to sort of sit down and work through those. So I'll pop that post up into the Facebook group today.
And that would be actually,
Um,
it's too bad we don't have as many conversations going afterwards. Cara, you and I have had them, but the whole fear thing would really be interesting conversation between people to hear what people brought up, what they identify as their fears, and how people choose to deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, that could potentially be a discussion, you know, next week at the normal time,
Yeah,
if I haven't stopped that up. Um, but I guess you're more than welcome to read out this quote if you like, Davida. I also love my quotes, so we always end it with our quotes.
so the
Um,
quote here is from Booker T. Washington. Success
mhm,
is to be measured not so much by the position that one has reached in life as by the obstacles which he has overcome.
yeah, I really like that one.
And actually, I
And
think
then
it ties in very nicely with what Davida was presenting. So it's a good
yeah,
way to wrap up.
absolutely.
So, Davida, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today. It was really interesting and very powerful.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And
Thank you.
and this is the end of week 7, and so we hope that people will look back where our previous episodes are all up on YouTube. And you can find us on Facebook at the Wellness Check-In. And there are links to the videos from there as well. Both Cara and I and Davida are on LinkedIn and always appreciate contacts and questions and connections. So please look us up there. And then until next week, thanks, guys.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Take
See you
care.
guys.